Welcome everybody to Scenes from the Spectrum. I'm SixersJustin and my co-host SixersGraeme. We're here to talk about James Harden debut, the Eastern Conference, and everything that comes with it. Make sure to check out our link tree in our bios. You can find our YouTube channel, our Spotify link, and all our socials. Let's just get right into it. Let's talk about James Harden's first 3 games and the Knicks little mini series. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, James Harden's first 3 games was pretty much everything that I expected. People, Nets fans especially were saying about James Harden being washed. It's not the same James Harden. We knew that James didn't want to be there. He obviously wasn't going to give 100% when he was playing for Brooklyn. And he came and he got a fresh start, and he's looking like the James Harden that everybody fell in love with a couple of years back. So I do think that it was a success, obviously, 3 wins. But James Harden really finding his role in this team is something that I thought was better than the wins, possibly. Like, we can get 3 wins back later in the season. Like, if we went over 3, yes, it would have been, yeah, James Harden, he's got to figure it out soon, but we could get 3 wins back. It's more or less James knowing his role and the players around him doing what's best for the team to get those wins. So that's James Harden, just getting acclimated, probably more important than the wins at this point in the season. We're trying to get top 3 seeding, but there's tons of teams that are losing. The Bulls lost to the Hawks last night. Brooklyn and Miami are beating each other out. I think that James Harden getting acclimated first 3 games, a major success. He's putting up the numbers everybody expected him to put up, and Embiid too. Embiid, numbers haven't dropped as well. So I think that's probably the biggest success out of the first 3 games.
Yeah, and if you watched our first episode, we thought that Embiid's points would drop a little bit, but they really haven't. He stayed in that MVP form and he's dropping 30 points after 30 points. But I really thought James Harden played well. He was dishing it out to his guys. He was really scoring the ball, and that signature step back three that we saw so many times, and he brought it with him, and it's just so good to see. He really can be the one of the league's best facilitators. He really is a good floor general. I mean, you've seen him with Maxey and what he's done with him. You've seen Maxey's best confidence all year. And he's dropped over 20 points in each of the first 3 games with James Harden. I'm really excited going forward, obviously. And I think we're a really good championship contender. We just got into the second seed last night after the Bulls lost to the
That's right.
Hawks.
Yep.
Um, so I'm really excited, and he makes this team so much better. Defense isn't a problem. We've had a top 10 defense throughout these 3 games in the league, and we've also had a top 5 offense within the first 3 James Harden games.
I think that the defense, it won't really have too much of a drop off as long as we have Joel Embiid. Our defense will be just fine. And Joel tends to turn on his defense in the second half, especially. So that's one thing that you got to look out for. Maybe the motor or everything's not there in the first half for Joel, but when it gets to crunch time and when the team needs defense, that's when Joel shows up. And Matisse has done a pretty solid job defending last couple games. The last game against the Knicks, we saw Matisse's best offensive game in a long while. So that's good. Another thing James Harden is really bringing to the table, he's setting up Matisse as a cutter like we should have been for the past 3 years. So I think that was good. We even saw Matisse knock down a 3, which is always, just that brings me out to my seat, and I stand and clap and applaud for Matisse whenever he makes a 3. And I think that James Harden knows the strengths and weaknesses of this team very well. He knows inside and out of what the 76ers need to do to win a championship, which is why him being acclimated into a role where he can be, a healthy player, comfortable playing, the 1 or the 2, depending on, how hot Tyrese Maxey gets in a game, and him helping Tyrese to be like a slashing combo guard, which is what Tyrese was supposed to be. And now you could see Tyrese step out and take the 3 And I think that those two are becoming so much of a problem to guard on the perimeter that you're taking more attention away from Joel in the post, that they got to pick their poison of whether they're going to try and guard the perimeter, to more effect, or the post. Either way, they're going to get cooked.
Yeah, and I going forward, I definitely think you're going to see improvements in Matisse offense. Before James Harden, we didn't really have anybody that could facilitate him the ball that well, and with drawing all the attention from Joel to Harden, teams stopped caring about Matisse on the offensive end and kind of leave him open. And we saw a few really good buckets from Matisse as Harden or Embiid were able to find him under the rim just completely wide open. I remember near the end of the game, the other night, the second Knicks game, Embiid and Harden were kind of playing with each other, with the ball, passing it to each other, and Embiid found Matisse for an open alley oop. But 10 points in a game is perfect for Matisse.
That's way more than enough. I think that Matisse knocking down 1 3 is good for another week, just to keep the defense honest. And I think that is good heading into this stretch that Matisse is playing his best offensive ball. Obviously, he's always going to be there defensively, but this stretch, especially with Matisse playing the best he's played on offense since, like the first 2 months of his rookie season, when you've got the Cavs, Heat, and Bulls and Nets coming up in the next couple of games. I think that's probably one of the main keys of this offense. Because even Joel might have an off night shooting, or even James Harden or Tyrese Maxey or Tobias Harris is just Tobias Harris. You need someone to bring that type of spark to where, all right, when it gets to the crunch time, we've played bad, but we've kept it close. Somebody can take over this game, and we've got someone like James Harden to do that. So I think that Matisse Thybulle, his scoring is such a spark because we've come to not expect it. Like, it's okay if Matisse doesn't score. We understand that. Like, we're not asking too much of him offensively because we know the value he brings on the other side of the ball. But when he does score 10, it's like, oh crap, we can't lose this game when Matisse Thybulle scores 10 points because you just wasted a great performance. And I think that when Matisse plays that style of ball, and James Harden using him just like he used Bruce Brown in Brooklyn, if you look at the film, it's eerily identical. So I think that Matisse playing that way, having the confidence to do backdoor cuts and call for alley oops and catch the pass, and you're playing, 3 really good playoff teams coming up. I think that's crucial for the Sixers offense.
Yeah, and you kind of saw it with Matisse being the cutter a little bit, kind of maybe once or twice per game, um, coming into Harden's debut. But with Harden, he's found many open opportunities, and it's just fun to see. Anytime he scores, it's really electric because you're just
Yeah,
never expecting it,
yeah,
and it
and
kind of brings a confidence boost to the entire team.
right. And I'll tell you this about Matisse cutting. He was doing it earlier in the year, but it's way different when you have Joel Embiid double teamed on the right elbow and dumping it over to Matisse when he cuts. It's another thing when James Harden is free flowing in the half court set and then just finds Matisse. And that's a lot different. Obviously what Joel was doing with his passing vision to Matisse was obviously excellent because he's getting double teamed, and it's usually a center and a small forward or a power forward that's doubling him. So it's 6'8" and above, and then he's able to find the open cutter. But when James Harden just he takes the screen, he's free flowing in the half court set, and then he just finds Matisse. That's a lot different, and it helps out the offense a lot more.
Yeah, I think going forward, we have a lot of things to look forward about. And I expect Matisse to keep this offensive kind of hot streak up for the rest of the season, especially with Harden and Embiid drawing so much attention. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see it. Is there any last things you want to say about Harden's debut before we move on?
Um, I just can't believe we have someone that can dribble, pass, and shoot.
I mean, yeah, we've been looking for a guy that
I
can
mean,
literally dribble the ball, that can pass the ball and shoot, and we found a guy that can do that, but is one of the league's best at it.
Yeah,
But
and we
this
finally
is
have a shot creator that's for themselves, and as good as they can create their shots for themselves, they're just as good as creating for others. And I think that we took I think other teams take that so much for granted when you look at like the Thunder and they have Shea, or the Rockets with Jalen Green and Luca and Ja and Trey Young, and even Jason Tatum has taken a playmaking leap. And you look at these teams that have those type of guys that can just get their shot, but they can also, with their gravity, kick it out to the open guy and it's not even a second thought about it. We didn't have that forever, and we finally do, and it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, you look at Ben Simmons, yes, he was a good playmaker, but not nearly on the level as James Harden is. All right. Let's move on to the Eastern Conference and kind of the seeding from that. I mean, Miami Heat, the first seed. The Sixers just moved into the second seed last night. The Bulls are dropping. They're in the third seed now, and they have a really brutal schedule coming up. Facing a lot of top 7 seeds, top 6 seeds, and, they've been really struggling against teams over 500. They have a negative record against it. What are your thoughts on the Bulls moving forward?
I've always said that the Bulls are frauds, and not necessarily like frauds, but they're not a top 2 or even top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. Yeah, they played great, but DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and Vucevic as my big 3 going into the playoffs isn't necessarily a recipe for success. And I think my good friend Matt, Sixers Matt on Twitter, a lot of you guys will know who he is. He came up with a good point like 2 months ago, way earlier in the season, that the Bulls are last year's Sixers. And I think that's a really good way to put it. They're very high in the standings. People didn't expect them to be this high, and they've kept it for a majority of the season. And you get to the playoffs, and they're just not built for it. And they have players, they have liabilities in the playoffs. They have injury problems, but they keep winning games in the regular season, and it's going to come back to haunt them. And it's going to be a slap of reality in the playoffs. And I think that's exactly what I see with this Bulls team. Yeah, they've got phenomenal players like Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are must-watch, TV. I love watching Lonzo Ball play. Pat Williams was one of my favorite rookies last season. Obviously, he's not playing now. Derek Jones Jr., one of the most electric players. Javante Green. Yeah, they got such a fun team. I just don't see it translating to success in the playoffs. They're a regular season team, in my opinion. They've overachieved this year, and they are good. They can beat you if you take them lightly, but they just shouldn't be mentioned with the big dogs in the East.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with what you brought up about Sixers Matt being the last year's Sixers overachieving in the playoffs, because coming into this year, I saw the Chicago Bulls as like a 5, a 6 seed, and they're definitely overachieving. Obviously, the injuries suck, but like me, like you, like a lot of people, we don't see the Bulls making too much noise in the playoffs. I kind of worry about them being a first round exit, but definitely I don't see them making it to the Eastern Conference Finals at all. But like you said, they're a very fun team to watch. I love watching DeRozan. I love watching Levine. Lonzo's fun when he's not injured. Caruso's always must watch
And
TV. They
Kobe White, when Kobe White gets hot, I mean, gosh, he is so tough.
Yeah,
And that team is just fun. Yeah, they've got a good energy. They play a fun style of basketball. I just don't see it translating to playoff success. DeMar DeRozan, his game has never really translated uh, to playoff success because the game is so much slower and it makes it that much tougher to hit contested mid ranges at a high clip. And Zach LaVine has never played. I don't know if he's ever played in the playoffs. I don't think so. Maybe no, I don't think he's ever played in the playoffs, to be honest. And then
I'm not
think about it.
sure. I'm not sure. I
Maybe
don't
he has,
remember.
but he hasn't done much with it. But yeah, I just honestly, the Nets and Bulls round one would be kind of funny, because two teams that I think the Nets would actually win that series. So I'm going to say that I would trust the Nets, obviously with KD and Kyrie, more than I do the Bulls by a pretty wide margin. And right now the Bulls are 39-24, and the Nets are 32-32.
Yeah, and looking past the Bulls in the Eastern Conference standings, I mean, you look at the Bucks, who since Christmas and since New Year's have kind of been a 500 team. They're hovering right around that 500 mark since Christmas. They've been struggling against top teams. They lost the game to the Nets the other night without KD, just Kyrie and the role players. Does these losses in the past few weeks or the past month or two kind of worry you about the Bucks?
Well, I'll tell you this about Milwaukee. Same with Chicago. Obviously, Milwaukee built for the playoffs. They've won it, and they've got pretty much the same team from last season. But you look at these away records, and like the Bulls 15-15 away from home, the Bucks 16-13. What is their ability to win on the road? And that's how you win in the playoffs. You have to steal at least one game or two on the road and able to win the playoffs. And that's a big thing with the Bulls. They're 500 away from home. The Bucks just 3 games over 500 away from home. Those are things they're going to have to shore up before the Bucks get into that Heat Sixers talk, where the Sixers and Heat both won 21 games away from home this season. So I think that that's one major thing that those two teams that have question marks for their ability to win road games. And that was one thing that the Sixers were hammered on a couple of years back, was their ability to win road games, because nobody was going to take them seriously in the Eastern Conference because they had the best home record but were sixth in the East, right? Because they couldn't win away from home to save their life. And I think that it's true. It just doesn't translate to good playoff basketball. So I think the away records, nobody in the East really has a good away record other than the Heat and the Sixers. The Celtics are 500. The Cavs are just above 500. Those are the things that, when it's so tight, the ability to steal a game at an opposing team's place, how well are you, versed for that?
Yeah, obviously Milwaukee's should make it far into the East, but kind of how far, like you said, with the struggling on the road.
It's tough to do it 2 years in a row, to even go far 2 years in a row. I think that it's a mental toll for sure.
Mhm.
Some of those players, we've already done it once. That's going to creep in, but obviously they're probably the scariest team to me. I put them, on the scary level over the Heat
Yeah.
for the Sixers. It would probably go like Bucks, Heat, and then Nets, Celtics, around there in that four of teams that I'm scared of in the playoffs, because they're definitely up there. They've proven they can do it. It's just the basketball they've put out there the last couple of games just have not been up to par.
Yeah, definitely some guys have been struggling. I mean, you've seen Middleton's recent struggles, especially against the Sixers before All-Star break. He really struggled against us. Giannis is going to get his. Um, Drew Holiday's playing well, but you need the thing that hurts about them the most is Brook Lopez being out. I mean, he was so good for them in their championship run last year, and that ability to stretch the floor. You've had Bobby Portis running the five for this year, but definitely they are uh, at the top of the scariest teams in the East that I don't want to play. And I think would have the same ranking as yours. Moving on from the Bucks, we'll go down the list of the Eastern Conference teams onto the Celtics, who kind of struggled opening the season all up until the last month and a half, 2 months, where they've kind of went on a hot streak, winning games and brought them into the fifth seed in the East. They had the blowout win against us, winning by around 40 points, and they've kind of just been on a tear recently. They've had the best defensive team in the past few months.
And it's
What
not
are your
even
thoughts on
close.
that?
It's not
Yeah,
even close.
yeah.
I think that that's the main thing for the Celtics is they can lock you down, and they're not going to have Jaylen Brown. We're not sure about his timetable. Like Aaron Nesmith went out, so they're really low on wings right now. I think that's one thing about the Celtics. How can they keep this hot streak when they have the injuries that they have? But I think that I think the Celtics are a really good playoff team. I would be scared to play them. But Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, how well and how efficient can they be? And the defense does dip some. Sometimes they'll have lapses, but I think they have all the tools defensively. They've got a really good on-ball defender. They've got good help side defender, and they've got a really good rim protector. So they've got all the tools, all the keys to be a really good defensive team. The injuries is what's going to kill them, honestly. How can they stay healthy, and how efficient can their shooters be? It's going to be the main question, because I don't care how good your defense is. If Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are a combined, 11 for 42, you can't win basketball games.
Yeah, and I think injuries play a huge part in the playoffs. Obviously, winning a championship does come with some luck, but it's kind of been over the past few years the most healthiest team wins. But they gotta stay healthy. Their defense is spectacular, and like you said, if Tatum and Brown aren't playing solid or catching fire, they're not gonna win the game. If they're combining shooting for under like 40% for that game, it's gonna be really hard to win because they do carry your offensive load.
Yeah, and that's the thing about, defense is really important in the playoffs, but it's just if you have a killer offensively, that's way more valuable. You can ask, Sixers and Hawks series from last season. They had a Kevin Herter and we didn't. We had a good defense, but we didn't have Kevin Herter. We didn't have Lou Williams, right? So I think that's a big thing that the Celtics might run into.
Yeah, and moving on from the Celtics to the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team that I didn't expect to do so well this year. Kind of the really tall lineups with Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. Um, they've been playing really well. I mean, I- Darius Garland is having a really good year. Injuries from their point guards have really killed them. Ricky Rubio is having a good year. Colin Sexton out for the year. What are your thoughts on the Cavs, and do you think they'll make any noise in the playoffs?
I do. I think with their 6 right now, they're probably gonna stay around there. They're gonna be a dangerous team. Like, if they face the Bulls, in the first round as a 3-6 matchup, that could go either way. And I think that if they can hover around, 5, 6, 7, they're gonna give, the higher seed in the first round a really good run for their money. So if I had to, like, pick one team to upset a higher seed in round one of the playoffs, it would 100% be the Cavs, because they have a playmaker that's going to be he's a top 15, easily a top 15 playmaker, Darius Garland. I mean, he is really good passing the rock. Obviously, he can make every shot on the court. Evan Mobley, a really good defender. Jared Allen, a top 10 defender, rim protector. And the thing about them is who's going to show up on the wing. Isaac Okoro, is he that guy? Like Dean Wade, is he going to hold it down for him? They do have holes in their roster for sure, and I think that it's only a matter of time before a team does eventually exploit that. But how can Darius Garland erase that with getting those shooters open with the way that he can handle the ball and shoot, and keeping defense honest. I think that the main thing for the Cavs is to stay healthy. They can't afford any more injuries, and they've done so well with what they have right now.
Yeah, the season-ending injuries for a few guys, especially in their point guards, have really killed them. They're a really young team. I think Kevin Love off the bench is really going to help, especially with playoff and championship experience. But one thing you said, I do think the Cavs are a team to upset a higher seed like the Bulls. I do think that would be a scary matchup for the Bulls. I love Jared Allen. I love uh, Garland. I'm a really big Evan Mobley fan. I do think they're gonna make noise in the playoffs. But definitely they cannot afford any more injuries. And comes down sometimes to the role players like Dean Wade and Okoro and Kevin Love and guys like that, who really can be the deciding factor in a win or a loss.
Yeah, I think that they're gonna stay around 6. I see them being higher than the Nets. They've got, 5 games on them. I don't think the Nets can overcome that. They're gonna be in it with the Celtics for 5 and 6, see who stays healthy. This Cavs team, they're much like the Bulls. They're really fun to watch, but they're pretty much properly rated right now with 10 games above 500 in the 6th seed. I think they have their similarities. Obviously, with what the regular season shows, the Bulls are better. And that probably is true in the playoffs as well. But the Cavs just have that, that killer in them with Garland, with Mobley, with Jared Allen. That front court defense is so vital in the playoffs. And I think that they have the recipe for success or for an upset.
Hmm. Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. Moving on to the 7th seed, and we'll kind of wrap it up at the 8th seed. But the Toronto Raptors, a team that I thought was going to tank this year, really is overachieving, and they look really well. I mean, their rookie Scotty Barnes has looked pretty well this year. He's been a solid guy. Siakam, solid. Van Vliet has been really really good this year. Are Would you pick them? So right now, the Raptors would play the Nets in a play-in game. What do you see from that, and what are your thoughts?
I don't see the Raptors making the playoffs. I think they just missed out or they lose in a play-in game to the Hawks. I think the Hawks are playing some of their best basketball of late, obviously with a win against the Bulls. So if I had to choose, it'd probably be like Nets 7, Hawks 8 after the play-in tourney. But the Raptors, they're a good team. Siakam's playing really good ball. Siakam is, now a triple-double threat, which is really cool for him. But it's just hard for me as a basketball fan and sit here and say they're a lock for the playoffs when their offense heavily relies on guys like a rookie in Scotty Barnes or an inefficient shooter, a bad shot taker in Fred VanVleet. So yeah, they've had a phenomenal run. They're overachieving like crazy. They're way ahead of schedule on their rebuild, and I think that they're a good team. Playoff pedigree wise, I would have to take the Hawks, obviously, and make the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They're the 10 seed. They're going to bypass the Hornets pretty soon. They're getting up there with the Nets. In a play-in scenario, like I said, Nets 7, Hawks 8.
Yeah. So looking at the standings right now, the Raptors are 3 games ahead of the Brooklyn Nets. I do think the Raptors drop into that 8th seed and the Nets take that 7th seed. But in a playing game, I would take the Nets. With the Raptors and the Hawks, if the Hawks continue to play this way and they keep up this hot streak, I do see the Raptors kind of missing the playoffs and the Hawks taking that 8th seed. The 9th seed right now is the Hornets. I don't see them doing anything in the play-in. I think the Hawks would beat them. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
those are two really young teams, the Hornets and then the Raptors, and they've just got their depth is a lot of young guys that they've been relying on, like guys that have killed the Sixers, like these random like Shem Petty, who's killed the Sixers this year for no reason. Uh,
always there's always that those random role players that'll kill the Sixers.
yeah, and I think that it's just I'm not sure how they can keep that up for the playoffs. Obviously, they've got really good players. Siakam has come into his own. He solidified himself as an all-star. And Scotty Barnes is on a trajectory to be an all-star. It shows how can you rely on those inefficient type of players when it comes to playoff time. And I think that, their shooting splits, like they're now 6,500. They had a stretch. They didn't have fans. Fred VanVleet was scoring 40 points. Siakam was almost putting up triple doubles, and it's just tough, right? So to put them, as a lock for the playoffs.
And let's move on to the Brooklyn Nets. Now I have plenty to say about them, but first off, I want to talk about the Brooklyn Nets fans and their kind of over. They think that Ben Simmons is going to come in and fix all this team's holes, and they think they really. I don't believe that they're going to make any. They're obviously going to make noise in the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to reach the Eastern Conference Finals, let alone the finals. But they're kind of calling Ben Simmons going to fix all their problems. They're kind of overrating all the players they got in the trade. Ben Simmons, you don't know if he's going to play this season at all. He's kind of been set back a few different times now, and he's kind of had this back injury kind of thing. I think we'll see a more realistic timeline after March 10th. I think they're one possible scenario is they're keeping him out until after that Philly game, and he might come back, which sucks to see because I did want to see him play in that Philly game. But, you're getting a guy like Ben Simmons who, he's had times where he's had a meltdown more than more than once. Scared to shoot the ball. He could be scared to drive. You're kind of looking like what kind of Ben Simmons are we going to get today? Are we going to get the passive or the aggressive? Obviously he's going to be that great defender, that good perimeter defender. He's going to bring much needed defense that you have. He's not going to be your primary playmaker. I mean, he's going to do most of the playmaking. I meant he's not going to be your primary ball handler, which that's going to be with Kyrie Irving in the games that he does play. But I'm just I don't really we don't know what we're gonna see going forward with this team because we haven't seen any of them play together. Katie just came back from injury. Kyrie can't play all the games. Ben Simmons is still out. It's gonna be really interesting to see going forward.
Yeah, I think that, the only situation where it might help them, and I don't even know if Steve Nash does this, is where he puts Ben Simmons as the 5 offensively and as the 1 defensively. Uh, and really, that's the only thing, but that just creates so much matchup problems every time you put, Ben Simmons on the floor, because then who's going to be guarding the center on defense, right? So I think that it's just the spacing you give up way. I mean, we know about the spacing, what you have when you bring in Ben Simmons. It's literally nothing. You hurt your team so much when you bring on Ben Simmons offensively because the spacing just isn't there. Kevin Durant is a player that likes to get to a spot in the mid-range. If you have Ben Simmons at the 5, it's not that long of a quick jog for Ben Simmons defender to go over to Kevin Durant and create a double team, which Kevin Durant, obviously he can shoot over doubles. He's done that, his whole career. But, when it comes consistently, that someone like that's getting doubled, or even when Kyrie tries to do a pick and roll with Ben Simmons, Kyrie's going to get doubled off the pick and roll because nobody respects Ben Simmons, even as a roller, much less a popper. So I think that that's one thing that Nets offense has to do. And the only way we can tell is for them to play games. And right now, Ben Simmons is not playing games. And they're going to need about a month. It's just going to be, too little too late at some point, because there's so many different things about their identity that they need to figure out. They have no identity. And then you're going to bring in Ben Simmons, who is he needs the ball in his hands. He needs to initiate in transition, and he needs to be, the primary defender, which I think he will be. But there's so much to know. Like, yeah, people say, well, Ben Simmons is a great fit because they need a defender. All right, cool. You're right about that. They need a good perimeter defender. They got it right. So now what do you do on offense? When it gets to the playoffs and every possession is in the half-court set, what do? Because Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving is going to get double teamed because of it. I promise you it will happen. Right. He might lock up, a Trae Young. He might lock up a Zach LaVine if you need him to, or DeMar DeRozan. But what do you do on offense? And I think that people are underestimating the power Ben Simmons brings negatively offensively, right? So he can get the assist. He won't get the assist when Kyrie has the ball the amount he has. So you can take that out the window. He'll still get his transition assist, and he'll probably pass the ball to Cam Thomas after he cherry picks in transition. Like, he's going to get those type of assists. In the half court set, you can't put him in the corner because he can't shoot. So that's useless. You don't want to take the ball out of Kyrie's hands. So you can't put him, top of the key as your point guard. So you have to put him in the dunker spot. And the thing about that is KD loves the elbow, loves the short corner. It's just, it's too easy to double KD or to double Kyrie on a pick and roll. I think that they've got so much to work out offensively. And like we said, you can ask the Sixers offense versus defense in the playoffs. They had a Kevin Huerter and we didn't. I already said that. You can have defense, but what to extent does it hurt your offense? The Nets are going to have to figure that out. And even then, they can't rely on Seth Curry and Cam Thomas to be the third option. They don't have Joe Harris anymore. I don't see this working out the way that Nets fans see it at all.
Yeah, I don't see it working out either. And I have to go back to a point that you made. Spacing is a huge issue. I mean, Andre Drummond's been getting the start at center for them ever since the trade, but you're gonna throw.
I'll stop you there. You will lose every game you play if Ben Simmons and Andre Drummond are on the court for more than 8 minutes together.
Yeah,
you'll lose that game because it is just not. That's not how basketball is played in the year 2022, and that's it makes it so one dimensional. Kyrie and KD, they can win you games, but they can only do so much, especially when it gets to the playoff format.
Yeah, they can only do so much, and if you pair Ben Simmons with a non-shooting center, it's just a recipe for disaster. I mean, teams are gonna just not care about Ben on the offensive end. I mean, you could throw him in the dunker spot, but like you said, KD likes to get inside, likes to get in that elbow in the short corner. But defense, obviously it fills in a lot of holes that you've been missing defensively. But offensively, it opens a million more holes. I mean, I don't know what Steve Nash is gonna do because Ben Simmons is most effective on the offensive end when he has the ball in his hands, but who's your number 1 and 2 option with the ball? That's always going to be in their hands, Kyrie and Kevin Durant. But yeah, I just think, with those two on that team, Ben's going to be doing nothing offensively, kind of like I'll compare him to a Matisse on our team. He's been doing nothing offensively until James Harden, obviously, but I see Ben as a 8 to 10 point per game scorer for this team. I don't really see him doing much offensively. I kind of think people have figured him out offensively and how to stop him. I think, until he fixes his free throws, you're gonna see hack a Ben for the rest of his career. But I think it's too many problems to really go deep into the playoffs. And obviously, don't get me wrong, Kevin Durant, if you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on your team is still scary. But with Ben Simmons, you have so many holes offensively that you just have to fill. And especially with, Ben Simmons' mentality, you don't always know which Ben Simmons you're going to get.
And I'll say this.
It's just you don't know what you're going to get.
Ben Simmons' defensive value just isn't worth the offensive problems right now for the Nets, especially with Joe Harris not being there. It's just, like you can't put him in the dunker spot because Kyrie and KD love the ISO. They love the isolation. Once they get past their man, They don't want a 7-footer that's guarding Ben Simmons to, be affecting their shot when they go to the hole. They want, 5 out. But you can't put Ben Simmons in the corner because Kyrie might pass it out to Ben in the corner and he has no clue what to do with the ball. And it just ruins the offensive flow. So I think that they're going to have a lot to figure out with. Like I said, that you can't simulate that type of stuff in practice. It has to be game. You have to show that in the game. And I just don't see them having enough time to figure it out, especially with Ben, being week to week. So that could be, 5 days or in 4 weeks. And it's just too much for Brooklyn in the amount of times, period they have. And it's not like they can just sit around and lose games because they can't. They might miss the playoffs if they do that. So they don't have much time to waste. They gotta get going. They're 2.5 back from being out of the play-in, not just the playoffs, the play-in. So they've got so much to work on. They're 32-32. They're 500. I just don't see them having the leeway to experiment with Ben Simmons. I just don't see it happening.
Actually, to bring to your point, they're actually one. The Hawks are only 1 game behind the Nets.
Okay, so
so say the Brooklyn Nets drop the next 2 games and the Hornets and the Hawks win the next 2 games, the Nets are out of the play-in. But last year, as you saw with Ben Simmons, we had a whole team of shooters, so obviously it worked out well for him. But Brooklyn doesn't have that stretch 5. I mean, I guess maybe you can call LaMarcus Aldridge that, but not really. It's gonna be a huge problem with the spacing, and I just so many questions with that team.
No matter what they do, they can put Ben Simmons and he can play the best ball he's played to his standards, right? And they still won't be able to guard the 5. They won't be able to guard Embiid. They won't be able to shoot Jared Allen. They won't be able to guard Bam Adebayo. They won't be able to guard Brook Lopez for all I care. They won't be able to guard Giannis. Any of those players. They probably won't be able to guard Siakam. They won't be able to guard Robert Williams. There's so many. They won't be able to guard Vucevic. There's so many 5s in this Eastern Conference. They can't guard Ben Simmons or no Ben Simmons. They just flat out can't guard those guys, right? They're going to have to outscore them with their 2 isolation guards in KD, Kyrie and KD, right? And then they lose spacing with Ben. And they become more one-dimensional as an isolation team, especially when you lose a shooter like Joe Harris. So with Ben, without Ben, I really think that their holes are still there. They still don't have a shooter because you can't replace Joe Harris. So they still don't have a shooter, right? And they still don't have someone that can guard the 5. And to me, those are 2 holes. They might not be the most important right now, but once it gets to the playoff scenario, those are still 2 holes that need question marks or they need answers that are question marks. So I think that with Ben Simmons, even when he plays good, they still won't be able to guard a 5 and they won't have good spacing.
Yeah, everything you said I agree with. I mean, they have so many questions coming up. Before we move on, what's your prediction for the Nets in the postseason?
They win in the play-in. They're either 7 or 8.
Second round, first round exit?
First round exit, probably. I mean, like if they're gonna play, like even if they play us first round,
I'd be fine with that.
I'd be completely fine with it. I mean, like they would lose to the Heat. They would definitely lose to the Heat. Like they would definitely lose to the Bucks. They could probably beat the Bulls. They would go back and forth with the Celtics or the Cavs. They'd probably beat the Raptors. But even like other than that, I just don't see them being, a team where they're just super, super dangerous unless you see Kyrie and KD just pop off for 45 every night. Can they do that? And can they stay healthy? Only time will tell.
All right. Moving on back to the Sixers kind of subject. Let's talk about Furkan Korkmaz and Isaiah Joe. Obviously, Furkan has been really, really struggling in the past month. He's been kind of almost unplayable. He's an okay defender, but he's just not finding his shot. And and I mean, he'll get open, but it's not going down, and it's really frustrating because you have a guy like Isaiah Joe on the bench who's I think can hit his shots, and he's shown you before. Um, he hasn't taken as many as Ferk, but he does have shoot a better percentage than Ferk. Um, I think when Isaiah Joe gets hot, he can't miss. I remember back, I think a few weeks ago, Isaiah Joe had a game where he had two N1s in a row. What are your thoughts on those two?
I would love to see Isaiah Joe take all the Furkan minutes until Isaiah Joe becomes bad, and then you can put Furkan back in. I think Furkan just needs, time to, find his shot, not playing the game. Like, go to practice, deconstruct what you think's wrong, mentally get prepared, and when you come into the game, that's when you know you're better. Just be relaxed. Isaiah Joe, I think it's a phenomenal shooter. He's much more athletic, so you can use him easier, especially with Harden. He can do more versatility-wise on the perimeter. Even if you ask him to dribble, it won't like it's going to be a turnover off his toe every time he dribbles like you do with Furkan. So I think that Isaiah Joe brings a lot more, style wise. He can do a little more. He's obviously younger, and we have Doc Rivers. So does that actually happen where Isaiah Joe gets to play? And Isaiah Joe is averaging 11 minutes a game this season. A lot of that's inflated with the run he got when we were depleted with COVID. So he hasn't really played since Harden's come back. And I'd love to see him with James Harden as a spot up shooter because he can make difficult shots, catch and shoot shots, dribble pull ups. He can, he can do it all, especially from the wing. I think he's probably one of the better wing and top of the key guys on this team. And I would just love to see him just take the minutes away from Furkan, let Furkan decompress his shot where he can get it going when we need him to. And I think Furkan will. Like this cold streak is bad, and it's only getting worse with he plays. It's just like a major leaguer. If Bryce Harper needs 2 days off, he gets 2 days off because these guys get in hitting slumps, right? The best hitters, sometimes they'll go a series where they strike out 5 times. It just happens. It's part of the game. And I think Furkan just needs a little bit of rest. And Isaiah Joe has a perfect chance to take it from him. I probably don't see Isaiah Joe becoming, what we think he is, because that's that later down the road. We overrate Isaiah Joe just a little bit. But I
Oh
want to
yeah.
see him play because we know what Isaiah Joe can do. If you watch the summer league, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We can't expect Isaiah Joe to be what was what he showed this summer, because obviously that's not against NBA competition. But we understand what Isaiah Joe brings versus Furkan, which makes it, which is why we're so anti Furkan at this moment.
Yeah, looking at the rotation and Doc Rivers always in his career has picked the veteran over the young guy, and I think this is a time where you kind of have to go against everything that you've been doing your entire career and say, hey, this guy's been struggling, and we have a really solid young shooter off the bench, and I do think Isaiah Joe should take all of his minutes. I have to agree with you. Yes, we overrate him a lot. um, I've been pushing the Isaiah Joe agenda ever since he got drafted. I've always liked him. Um, and I don't even think he's touched the floor since Harden's been here, except in like 1 or 2 garbage time minutes. But it's really
Yeah,
frustrating to
I don't
see
think
when.
Isaiah Joe and Harden have been on the floor together.
Yeah.
Maybe at the
Um,
very end of the Knicks game Wednesday.
yeah.
Um, but I can't remember where they've got like a run in the second quarter together. That's what I want to
Yeah.
see.
But it's definitely really frustrating when you have such a struggling Furkan and you just have Isaiah Joe collecting dust on the bench. I mean, you have a really solid shooter in him. He can hit it from everywhere. He can hit catch and shoot, um, kind of an off the dribble three. He can hit a few deep ones. Um, his really really good from top of the key and from the wings, but It's just really frustrating that Doc always goes with the vets over the young guys, and I think that's a big thing even with the centers. I mean, we would all Sixers fans would love to see Charles Bassey get a run at the backup center, but, we wasted a 10-day contract on Willie Cauley-Stein. He didn't touch the
And
floor.
again, now we have
We
DJ. So
Now
it's
we have
probably we're not
DeAndre
going to see.
Jordan.
Yeah, we're not going to see Bassey again. Probably at all this season. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see Bassey at all. Maybe he plays tonight a good amount, but
He just got caught up, last night.
yeah. So he'll probably play tonight, and that might be the Charles Bassey for the season unless injuries happen. So like DeAndre Jordan, I think he's going to work well with Harden. A lot of Sixers fans didn't like the signing of DeAndre Jordan. I didn't mind it because I know he's not going to play that often. So even if it's like him and Harden together, I think that it's going to be just fine. And another thing about the new Sixers, Tobias Harris has not been good at all. You look at his recent games, just hasn't been well. I don't want to say that because he might be the Tobias Harris we know, but I mean he made two field goals against Minnesota, two against the Knicks in Madison Square Garden, and five against the Knicks at Wells Fargo Center. And you look at the points, he's just 14, 12, and 6, right? So he's just not having that scoring output. And I think he just needs more work with Harden, more of them to get acclimated together, because the flip side of that is Tyrese Maxey is thriving with James Harden. We really thought it'd be the other way around.
Yeah, you know, we always make a joke about, Tobias pump faking the three and going in for a contested mid-range, but, ever since we got Harden, he won't stop doing it. I think Harden kinda yelled at him, at the Knicks game and said, "Hey, like, we need you to take those open catch and shoot threes." It's not like he's a bad catch and shoot three guy, he's a solid catch and shoot, three guy. Um, he needs to, be in the right mindset, find his fit with this team, which, has always been a struggle for him. But Harden is really a guy that can bring the best out of anybody, and I think a guy that can really thrive from that is Tobias Harris. Um, Obviously, he needs to change his game a little bit of more of a catch and shoot and stop, not less posting up and all that. But just take your catch and shoot threes, make 2 a game, score 15 a game. That's all we're asking out of you. And with Tyrese Maxey, that's just a whole different story of just on a whole nother level.
Yeah, Maxi has been phenomenal. Tobias, not so much. And I'm not gonna overreact to that at all, really. I think that's just it's Tobias. He's gonna now come into being like a third or fourth option, and he needs to become a catch and shoot three guy, because that's what he is at this current time until he shows that he can expand his game. And for Tobias, when he's really gonna have to get his points is when Joel's on the bench, and he's getting some run with the second unit, which I expect him to do, especially tonight. I think there'd be a good opportunity for Tobias to really up his scoring, and even with his volume being getting some bench run with guys, hopefully like an Isaiah Joe and Shake Milton at point guard, and you see Tobias Harris out there. I think that's when you can really see Toby getting some of his offensive volume. We do play a game today, 76ers Cavs. Sixers are heavy favorites tonight. I think they're 7.5 point favorites, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 7.5. Their money line is minus 320, so pretty heavy favorites. Over under 217. I think that the Sixers, the way that they've been playing, is a pretty good measuring stick for what's to come. I think that the Cavs don't stop us here. We've been playing really good ball. We've already beaten the Cavs by a lot. Yeah, it's a home game.
Yeah, I was
I
at
just
that
don't.
game, yeah.
I don't see many teams stopping us, and I just don't see the Cavs being the team that steps in the way. Maybe we have a poor shooting night, and we lose this game, that's definitely possible. I'm not saying this is a guaranteed win, but we're heavily favored, and I can't disagree with that sentiment that we should win this game by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, obviously I see us winning this game, but I want to bring to a point that when we lose our first game, it'll happen at some point. When we lose our first game, everybody's gonna freak out and lose it. Like we're gonna lose one game, and everybody's gonna be like, "Oh my god, like oh you guys lost the trade, all this." But I wouldn't be mad if we lost. I mean, you know, we've been playing really well. We're bound to have a poor shooting night one time or another, but I'm expecting to win this game and
Right.
most games down the stretch. We do have a tough stretch coming up, especially starting tonight. We got a back-to-back starting with the Cavs, and it's the Heat tomorrow, if I'm correct. And
Yes.
then the Bulls, and then
And then March
the
10th.
and then March 10th, the game that we've all been waiting for, but obviously Ben's not going to play that game. What do you think our record is going to be in the next 4 starting tonight?
I'd say 3-1 we go here. Maybe it's to the Cavs, maybe to the Heat, maybe to the Bulls. You've already beaten the Bulls 3 times. It's hard to beat a team 4 times in one season.
Mhm.
But I don't see us losing to the Nets. Harden and Embiid will show up for that one. There's no doubt about that. And I think that 3-1 I would be very happy with that, because we could definitely lose to the Cavs, Heat, or Bulls on any given night because they're all good regular season teams, and that's what they do. The Heat in Miami off of back-to-back is probably the one I'm looking at where that's probably the loss here, but that's the most likely loss. Obviously, I would love to go 4-0, and I think that also is possible, but 3-1 I would be very happy with in this next 4-game stretch: Cavs, Heat, Bulls, and Nets.
Yeah. We're not sure when we're gonna see a DeAndre Jordan debut. It might be tomorrow night. But I do think we might lose tomorrow night. That's kind of the only game that I'm kind of worried about in the next 40 game stretch on a back to back facing the 1 seed. Um, but we could kind of talk a few minutes about DeAndre Jordan and kind of what he's going to bring to this team. Obviously, we only need him to play 5 to 8 minutes in the playoffs, and I
Max,
think
yeah.
I think he can get that. I think we could get that out of him. I mean, he's on the. Do you know exactly how old he is?
He's up there. I don't know the
Yeah,
exact age, but he's at the time where he knows he's gonna get limited run. He's an older guy looking for a championship, and he's gonna do whatever it takes to help the Sixers win. And I think that's a good environment for the Sixers.
yeah, and the past like year and a half, 2 years, the Sixers have been a team that gets ex Lakers and turn them into solid role players. But
That's right.
he's a good. I think he'll be a really good duo next to Harden. Can be a lob threat, get boards, all that. We just need 5 to 8 solid minutes, physical minutes out in the playoffs, and I do think a lot of Sixers fans were overreacting to it. I'm not mad at it. There's not much else we can do at the backup 5, especially because Doc won't play Charles Bassey or maybe a Paul Reed. But yeah, there's just not much you can do, and I think DeAndre Jordan was just a solid signing. He can give you a few solid minutes.
Yeah, I like the DeAndre Jordan signing. Honestly, I think it was pretty cool that we're gonna get someone like Jordan, who I didn't think was even gonna be on the market. So
Yeah,
yeah,
neither did I. All right, you ready to move
are we
on?
time? Are we time to rank? Are we
Time to
ranking the six?
rank. Time to
Oh,
special segment called "Ranking the Six," where we
nice.
rank the 6 favorite Philly debuts in the past 20 years, I'd say, or
I It was
longer
our
than
latest
that.
one. Yeah, 1996 is how far we
It's
went back on this one. So if we
it's the
miss one,
latest one.
we apologize, and we also do not care. This is not the best. This is the favorite.
Yeah, these are just
We
before
made
we
this
started
list
the
together, by the
yeah,
way,
before we
before the show
started the
started.
podcast, we
We
kind of
made
came
this
up with
together
this.
about like 30 seconds before we press record. And yeah, we're gonna start off with number 6. By the way, we do 6, not 5, because this is a Sixers podcast, so deal with it. At number 6, Michael Carter Williams debut, 22 points, 12 assists, 7 rebounds, 9 steals against LeBron James. This was the biggest teaser of all teasers that I've witnessed. I thought MCW was that guy.
We all
Obviously,
did.
young Graham was going nuts. Obviously, when you're like in grade school and it's the first day of the season, you get all hype talking with your buddies at school. None of mine were Sixers fans, so the next day, I was a couple of my LeBron friends. I was giving them hell for Michael Carter Williams. I remember that vividly, actually. But yeah, Michael Carter Williams, that debut is so insane, and it doesn't even seem real. Like, how did Michael Carter Williams do that?
Yeah, I remember I literally remember watching that game and be like, "Oh my god, like this
We
is the
just hit the
guy."
jackpot. Yeah,
Yeah, dude, I felt like we won the lottery with this guy, and obviously things didn't pan
no,
out that well. But dude, what a game! Almost had a triple double with steals, but
they almost
close to
had a
a
quadruple double
close to a quadruple double. That's definitely a Sixers debut that I'll never forget.
for sure. And that was that number 6. Number 5, we've got Devontae Smith's debut in Atlanta. His first catch as a Philadelphia Eagle was a touchdown. I was there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The place was going nuts. Of course, there was more Eagles fans and Falcons fans there, that poverty franchise in Atlanta. Um, I had a blast. Tons and tons of Smitty jerseys were there. I met some great people that I've never seen since, and I wish I could see them again because they were just fantastic. Eagles tailgates away is so much fun. But yeah, Devontae Smith's debut, I'll never forget. I was sitting about the second deck, near like the end zone closest to me was where he caught the pass, so I saw it coming. I was literally started levitating because I could not believe I just saw Devontae Smith's debut game where he caught a touchdown. So that's at number 5. That's it's such a great memory.
Moving on to number 4, happening very recently, the James Harden debut against the Minnesota Timberwolves, where he had 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 12 assists, a double-double, almost triple-double in his debut. We talked a little about it in the beginning of the podcast. Really great performance. It's definitely one that I'll remember for a long time. But there's really not much to say about it. I mean, we talked about it earlier. It's just a great debut. And then
It's a sign for things to come. It's always a fresh breath. It was just breath, like so fresh. Like, we're done with Ben. We have someone that can play basketball, right? We have someone that can play the game the right way. That's exactly that I was feeling watching that game. It's like we finally have the guy, right? Just years and years of pointless 16 assist games with 5 points, right? So we finally have that guy. That's what I was feeling like watching that. And it was just, like I said, just fresh air for
yeah,
Sixers fans.
and kind of for all Philadelphia fans, because very rarely do you see a superstar of this caliber come to Philadelphia, right? And to see somebody like James Harden come to Philly is it's just insane to see, and it's definitely a debut I'll remember. Moving on to number 3, the Allen Iverson debut. Obviously, me and Graham weren't alive during this time.
No,
We're
I was
young.
not alive in 1996.
He scored 30 points in his debut and in 96, but big things to come. Obviously, he went to the finals in 2000 or 2001. I forget
Yeah,
which year it was.
2001. Yeah.
But
Honestly, I wasn't alive, but I have watched this game. I believe it's on YouTube. I do remember watching this game a couple years back.
I have not watched this game.
It was against the Bucks. I know that for sure. But like AI was supposed to be great, and he was. He was the smallest player on the court, and he was giving everybody buckets. And yeah, I do remember that 30 points. The commentator was like, "Here's this Allen Iverson guy. Let's see what he's about." And he goes like super efficient. I have a 12 for 19 shooting. So for if you know any type of Allen Iverson discourse on Twitter, is that his inefficiency is what's costing him about 20 spots on the all-time great list, where I believe he should be. But other than that, I mean, 30 points, 12 for 19. He was electric. Like it was kind of like Michael Carter Williams, where he was just electric, and this actually kind of panned out pretty well.
All right, you want to take number 2?
Yeah, number 2. I was not alive for this one. I think Justin, you might have been alive, but you probably weren't watching.
I wasn't watching.
I don't know if you watched Chase Utley's debut Grand Slam. Of obviously Utley, a Phillies legend, and his first hit being a Grand Slam against the Colorado Rockies, April 24th, 2003. I wasn't there to experience it, but I can only imagine a hyped up prospect. You finally call up to the majors. He's supposed to be good. First, hit he sees is a Grand Slam. That must have been like a crazy experience. Justin, you were alive. So I don't know if you want to tell me about this experience you had.
I was only less than a year old, but no, that must have been crazy to see, especially for Phillies fans. I mean, you got a guy who can be really good, and nothing gets better than your first hit being a home run and then a Grand Slam to top it off. I mean, nothing gets better than that. Moving on to number 1, which is my personal favorite.
Me too.
Embiid's debut versus Oklahoma City Thunder, where he had 20 points, 7 rebounds. October 26, 2016, a day that'll forever live with me. I mean, so much talk going into this game. Is Embiid able to stay healthy? Is he really going to be this guy? Trust the process thing. Is the process over? All this stuff. But going into this game, there were so many questions about Embiid, and I kind of think he answered a lot of questions after or during this game about the kind of player he can be. Obviously he didn't get to finish out the whole season with I forget what kind of injury it was, but he only played I think about half of the season. But just a debut that'll forever live with me, and the famous meme that came out of it, the Philadelphia fans sticking the 2 middle fingers up at Westbrook.
Yeah. That's my favorite Philadelphia fan of all time. But yeah, that Embiid debut was just like, it was literally like buzzing with enthusiasm after the game, after all the build up. Like Philly sports talk radio prior to the game was probably more critical than anybody else. I do remember that much. That it was more brought on by Philadelphia more than the national media, because they were fed up that they drafted a guy who hasn't played yet. We don't even know what he's going to look like when he plays, and he just had one performance to shut everybody up, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's one that'll forever live with me.
I will never forget where I was when I was watching that game.
Oh my God, I'll never forget. All right, I think that's all we have for today.
We cover a lot.
Do you want to do the outro?
Well, okay, we're at an hour and 10 almost, I believe.
Yeah.
It was a really good episode. If we missed out on one of our 6 that you think that we should have said in our most memorable Philly debut games, we sincerely do not care one bit, because this is our list.
But if you do have one that
you can kindly suggest that we missed on, we'll look
drop it in the comments.
We might not care still, but you can still drop in the comments. But yeah, link tree in the bio. Follow our Twitters. I'm at SixersGraeme. He is at SixersJustin. We're very active on there, especially in the Sixers games. You don't want to miss our tweets. And you can follow this podcast, Scenes from the Spectrum. You can actually follow the podcast on Twitter. I know that's crazy, right? That is at SFTS podcast _ everything you need to know. Our link tree is also in that bio. Link tree is in this YouTube description, YouTube channel, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. It's on there. Go follow us. You keep up to date. We're going to start interacting with you guys very, very soon. Q&A, guest on the podcast. You do not want to miss it.
And if you guys didn't know, you can actually follow us on Spotify.
That's right.
At Scenes from the Spectrum.
Download
Thank you
Apple
guys.
Podcasts, 5-star, do it all.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you made it this far, you're a real one. Drop a comment, give it a like, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you later.
Peace out, go Sixers.
Yep.
Everybody